Hey guys, it's Convolva here and welcome to the video. Today we're going to discuss how to create an acid sound from scratch while using just the native tools. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Now this is a tutorial for people who are just getting started with Patcher and want to learn more about it. But if you already know how to use Patcher, then don't worry, we are going to make a sick acid sound with it today. To get started, let's load up Patcher into the channel rack, and for that I'm going to right click here, go into insert, go inside Patcher, and that's going to load up Patcher right here. Alright, now an important thing to note here is that there are two types of patchers that are available to us inside FL Studio, and it kind of sucks that they both look the same. One is the generator version, which is the one we have loaded up here. You can also load up patcher inside the mixer. If you want to load up more than 10 effects in your mixer slot, you can use patcher for that, and also for parallel processing. Let's get back to the channel rack version that we have here. So the first thing that you would need to create an acid sound is a synth that can generate a consistent saw wave. So for this, I'm gonna be using Hammer. So I'll just drag and drop here. By the way, I middle mouse clicked here to come here and then dragged and dropped it. And so let me put my headphones now. I'm using Hammer to keep it all native, but you can use any synth such as Citrus, Silent One, Serum, or whatever you have that can create a consistent saw wave. The next thing that you're going to need is a filter which can do the movement for the acid, for which I'm going to be using parametric EQ2. Now, I've heard a lot of stuff regarding how somehow FL's parametric EQ is inferior to other EQs and such. But to be honest, none of that is true because the mathematics of digital signal processing for all EQs is the same. And the only thing that can differ is how the EQ handles the bandwidth or Q factor of the filter points and stuff like gain factor, and which I'll be demonstrating now in a bit. So to bring that up, again, I'm gonna middle mouse click here in the gray area and drag parametric EQ2 into the chain. But before we can create the filter shape and link it to this, we need to set it up so that it behaves that way. For which we will need the Fluty envelope controller, which is something which we can find on the left side right here. And it's gonna immediately connect the MIDI point here. So the Fruity envelope controller has a total of 8 articulators, as you can see here, which we can use to create those articulations. We need to right click on the envelope controller, go into outputs, controllers, and select articulator 1, which is going to bring up this node, which we can connect here. But we can't directly connect it to the audio here, the main input. So we need to go inside the parametric EQ and change one of the tokens like this one to a low pass, and then change the steepness to steep 8 and then reduce the bandwidth like this. Now I can control the filter by moving this, and you can hear it like this. Now we need to activate this as an input, and to do that we need to just right click here and click on activate, which is going to bring up an input node right here, which we can use to connect the Fruity envelope controller to the parametric EQ2. And now you'll notice that whenever I hit a note on my keyboard, it's gonna follow this kind of shape. So let me just remove all this by selecting the step editing and right clicking and dragging, removing this, and create a shape something like this. And let's say I use double curve for this. Alright, so let's reduce the bandwidth a little. And we can also control it by controlling the decay knob here. Now this is good, but this is not quite there yet. And this is probably why a lot of people complain about Fruity parametric EQ not being as good. The reason for that is because Fruity parametric EQ has a maximum limit of 18 dB gain, which is fine for most use cases. But if you do sound design like this, it can be limiting sometimes. In other synths such as Serum and Silent One, the peaks of the resonance tend to be quite high and it can sound a little harsh and steep, which is something I think the parametric EQ2 developers tried to avoid and they sort of limited it to 18 dBs, but we can get around that using this method. The way we do that is to use another instance of parametric EQ right after this first one. So let me just save this preset and drag and drop. This is going to create a duplicate of what the first shape was, and I can just do the same thing again so that the signal is processed twice. So let's do the same thing again. Let's activate this thing, connect that to the same articulator shape. You can already start to notice that it's sounding a lot like an acid sound. Now let's just bring down this a little. Now that we got the bare bones ready, let's spice it up now with some distortion. And you can use pretty much any distortion for this, but I'm gonna be using Fruity Wave Shaper because we are keeping it all native for this one. So I'm gonna go here and drag and drop Fruity Wave Shaper. And this is a distortion plugin inside FL Studio. What it does is basically going to take your input and it's gonna change it based on the wave shape, just like how the Serum's wave shaper acts. So let's distort it a little. Let's take it a step further and make it a asymmetric or a bipolar distortion. So for that, I'm gonna just do something like this. And this is just making sure that the upper half cycle of your waveform gets distorted differently from your lower half cycle. And that can create some really cool distortion profiles just by using something simple like this. So let's create a shape that works. All right, let's also engage the high quality center and oversampling to 2x. The center is basically going to remove any DC bias that can get added due to asymmetric distortion shapes like this. More on that in a different video. Now, if you look into the frequency spectrum here, it has a lot of low frequency rumble. So we need to clean that. And to clean that up, I'm gonna again bring up Fruity parametric EQ2. And I'm gonna just convert the token 1 into a high pass. And let's go steep 6 for this one, not too steep, and remove all that. Let's change the gains of these a little. Let's make this like this, and let's make this reset. Yes, let's see what happens if we increase the gain on both of these. Now we're getting something distorting. Let's reduce the post here so that it doesn't hurt you guys. Notice that pitch shift that's happening because of the filter movement. Which is actually a really cool thing for a sound like this because it's gonna create interesting movements. Let me just rename this. It's a high pass. Finally, let's add a transient processor to bring in the transients of the acid sound. Yeah. So I've added a transient processor here so that I get some of that transient information retained in the sound. So now that we got this set up, let's just add a little bit of a chorus here. And I'm gonna just do that right after the wave shaping. So let's do it like this. I'm gonna mute this and keep this on. And let's get this back. All right, now it's getting somewhere. Let's add an EQ again to enhance some of these frequencies. And this is just something I did based on personal preference, you can totally avoid this. So I'm gonna also low pass it a little in the end, like this. All right, to the fun stuff, delay and reverb. Now for this, I'm gonna simply use the preset we made in the last tutorial on delay and reverb. We used patcher for that. So let's load up a patcher inside the patcher. So for this, I'm gonna use the FX side of patcher. So I'm gonna just get that here, open this up. It's not going to make any sound right now because from FL Studio is not connected to FL Studio. So even if you hit any notes, it's not going to create any sounds. But don't worry, you can hear the sounds again as soon as you connect them. So let's go to our preset which we made last time and open that up. By the way, the preset is available for free download in that video. I'm going to link it down in the description and over here in the cards. So this is how it sounds now. Gonna change the delay EQ and the reverb EQ a little. Yeah, I like that. Now, once you have a sound like this, you can again tame the frequencies a little more by using a parametric EQ. So I'm going to do that one last time. And after this, I typically tend to mess with the sound that I've created again. So for this, I'm going to just use Venom, which is like a free distortion plugin. And I'm going to place it right after the parametric EQ, that is after the transient processor. And this is just to create a little bit of a different asymmetric distortion profile. And we're going to do that by reducing this balance. This balance is basically going to shift the symmetry towards the negative half cycle if you bring it down. And let's add a little bit of drive to distort it and mix it with this mix. Again, this is more of a stylistic preference sort of a thing. So you don't have to do this step. I just wanted to add this because I like this plugin a lot for asymmetric distortion. And after all this, let's add the king of all plugins, Soundgoodizer, right in the end. And just reduce this a little. There we go. All right, so if you have noticed that the sound changed quite dramatically when I added Soundgoodizer, there's a reason for that, and that's because Soundgoodizer is basically a multi-band compressor because of how it's made. And Soundgoodizer is basically a preset inside Maximus. You can confirm that if you go inside Maximus, you would see that there are some profiles here which are named A, B, C, D, and those are basically the Soundgoodizer presets. The knob basically controls the LMH mix. So that's a fun fact. Let's delete that. Let's bring this back. Actually, I do think the high frequencies are a little too aggressive, so let's tame them a little one last time. Wait. Oh, crap. This is a weird bug in FL Studio where sometimes Patcher just does that. So let me just add this back. Add parametric EQ. And let's reduce this a little bit and reduce these frequencies as well. Because our human ear is more sensitive to the higher mids, especially around 4000 hertz. So let's reduce them a little. All right. And there we have it. So this is the new patch that we made. So let me just rename it preset file icon. Now let's test it with some MIDI I wrote before. So I'm going to just paste that, and it sounds like this. Now, the fun part here is that we didn't do anything to our basic saw sound that we initiated the preset with. So we can go inside Hammer and maybe change the timbre to a square wave. Let's see how that sounds. Sounds pretty cool. What if we add some unison? That's garbage. Don't do that. And there you have it. Now I'm going to be posting this preset on my Patreon. If you haven't checked it yet, I do regular giveaways there, like samples and presets, private live streams, and exclusive content, stuff like that. So if you'd like to support the channel and me, then that's a way you could do that now. All right, guys, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.